Alright, so I have a Shopify store where I offer handmade one-of-a-kind tie-dye, and over the last few weeks, something strange has unfolded that I need to investigate further. But first, instead of repeating myself, I'm just gonna allow my past self from about a week ago to set the stage.
Flashback.
Oh yeah, and then I got another order right after, I think it was even the same day that I wound up shipping out those two spiral designs. I got an order for the exact same two designs, which was really interesting to me, and they left this note with order, which I haven't yet taken a second to look into that and find out what that even means. For some reason, I have a hunch that it has something to do with like a musical artist or band. Maybe that's what I'll do right now. Let's figure out what on earth is Dudesy. Okay, so the first things that come up are Dudesy Discord, Dudesy merch, and Dudesy YouTube. Podcast, YouTube show, artificial intelligence. First of its kind media experiment. I'm going to their YouTube channel right now.
I had a dream last night.
Okay, so Dudesy is a podcast, it looks like. Well, podcast and a YouTube show where they have video versions. This is interesting. I'm gonna subscribe so that I can come back and watch some of their stuff later. So I'm definitely gonna check that out later on. I'm glad I remembered that and thought to look it up right now, because honestly, otherwise I probably never would have.
End of flashback.
I looked a little bit further into this Dudesy podcast because the first of its kind media experiment part really intrigued me most. And turns out apparently it's the first ever podcast to be completely created, produced, and directed all by artificial intelligence. After I learned that, I was like, whoa. So I can only assume that somehow, some way, my website must have came up on this podcast somehow. Oh, but one last thing. One of the two tie-dye designs that went out with each of those orders, I noticed that it was the same two colors as the thumbnail pictures for the Dudesy YouTube channel. So I am so curious to figure out how all of this ties together, but at the same time, I'm honestly kind of scared and nervous to find out, because what if it's something embarrassing, like, I don't know, the AI decided to answer trivia questions or spit fun facts and something along the lines of what's the least frequently purchased products on all of the internet or something, which honestly, in all reality, that'd be hilarious, and I can't complain anyway. I'm grateful for the orders that this podcast apparently sent my way, so thank you to the Dudesy podcast. But now it's time to do some investigating while I do some ice dyeing. So according to my calculations, the most likely episode that this mystery originated from is probably episode 38. That seems to align with being like the most recent episode to come out just before those orders were placed. What I'm about to do right now is start listening to episode 38 while I start ice dyeing the first side of the Mindscape designs that I just laid out on the splat racks. Hi, Bean. Anyway, I'll stop to report back, hopefully more like react real time, if and when anything at all of potential interest comes up. Something I forgot to mention, I was just reminded when they said it in the intro, but in addition to it being completely controlled and created by AI, the AI also selected the hosts for the podcast and also has access to all of their personal data. I believe like search history, messages, social media apps, even banking, I believe. I just finished episode 38 and nothing at all came up related to my website or tie-dye or anything of the sort. However, I am wondering if it might have been part of the Patreon only bonus segment, because it was something to the effect of the host explaining their favorite creative activities. I'm a little confused because I felt pretty confident based on my calculations that it would be episode 38 more than likely, but I'm about to start episode 39 since it's part 2 to episode 38, and then if nothing comes up in this one, I'm just gonna have to work my way backwards, starting with 37 from there. Okay, just a quick update on my little investigation so far. I just finished ice dyeing the first side of those Mindscape designs, and I got through episode 38 and 39, and so far nothing at all noteworthy has came up regarding my tie-dye shop or just anything at all that would relate back to those two orders, which at this point I am still absolutely convinced that both of those orders have something to do with this podcast, especially because the note that was left with the second order. Here comes Bean already to say hi. Hi. You want to say hi? You didn't have to get up from your nap to interrupt me. Alright, it's the next day and I finished ice dyeing the second side of those Mindscape designs that are all still behind me. And now I'm about to explain everything I learned about the connection between those two orders in the Dudesy podcast while I rinse and unravel these 8 ice dyes. So after listening to those 3 episodes in full, I don't know if I already said it or not, but I listened to episode 37, 38, and 39. After listening to those 3 episodes entirely, what I ultimately came across that explains the potential connection between those orders and this podcast was absolutely nothing at all. However, I did glean a few things, starting with everything I did learn. The first thing being that they have a Patreon where they offer Patreon members only bonus additional content to the podcast, and also that their audience is on a kind of overall mission to essentially force the podcast on people. And the Patreon members only bonus segment of episode 38, which was the episode I initially determined would be the most likely to contain the answer to this mystery. The bonus segment for that same episode was something to do with the host's favorite creative endeavors or activities. I forgot the exact phrasing. And although it was about the host's personal favorite activities or something of that nature, still it was the closest any of the 3 episodes got to anything in the realm of tie-dye. Yeah, Bean, you think so too? Yeah. He thinks I'm right. But anyway, now combining all of that with the already known facts, the first being how odd and abnormal it was for me to receive 2 duplicate orders for 2 of the most infrequently purchased designs I offer, but especially the fact that they came in like back to back. And also, one of the 2 tees in each order was the same 2 colors as the Dudesy branding logo and the thumbnail pictures for their YouTube videos. And then lastly, the note that was left with one of the 2 orders. Now here's the thing about that. If I were to have just received the 1 order, I probably would have instantly just chalked it up to a matter of it being a listener of the podcast merely ordering some tie-dye, but then also just so happened to be participating in that whole mission to kind of force or coax people into listening to the podcast. But like I said, given the timing of the 2 orders, that's the thing that has me absolutely convinced that somehow, some way, my website, but more specifically those 2 product pages in particular, must have came up on the podcast. And so basically my final conclusion as it currently stands is that the answer to this mystery most likely lies within the bonus segment of episode 38, and I also would go as far as to suspect that the person who left that note with order might have done so intentionally and very cleverly, I must say, although I suppose that wouldn't make sense unless they were aware that I'd gotten more than 1 order. So either way, it does still tie into my overall theory that it has something to do with the Patreon community. So in that scenario, if I were to actually follow their demand and listen to Dudesy, I would effectively be sent on a wild goose chase because the connection to those 2 orders on the podcast would be impossible to make unless I were to pay for the Patreon membership, which I don't even know what would be more hilarious if that were something intentionally manufactured within the members only community as a way of participating in their whole mission to force people into listening to the podcast, but taking it a step further by orchestrating, like I said, a potential wild goose chase with an impossible to make connection. Although I have a feeling I made it. Either way, I really don't know what would be more hilarious if that were some kind of intentionally orchestrated thing, or if it were completely unintentional, although that's really coincidental to get 2 orders back to back for some of, like I said, my most infrequently purchased designs. I have to acknowledge it could very well be a coincidence, but with that is as far as I was able to get when it comes to attempting to solve this mystery and the connection between the mysterious note with order and this AI created and directed podcast. The best I can hope for is that maybe the algorithms on YouTube will align for me, and maybe somehow, some way, this video will reach somebody that is part of the Dudesy Patreon community that knows the answer to this mystery, because if so, I would love to know. This is something I'm going to forever wonder about. Also, can I just say that I'm really happy I finally followed through with filming this video after much procrastination, but I am equally as much bummed that I didn't get anything to react to real time on camera, which I made the thumbnail for this video before I ever actually started filming this main part where I attempted to listen to and react to to the Dudesy podcast. So I must say, I feel like I clickbaited my damn self. So I'm sorry if you feel like you were clickbaited to some extent too, but I hope attempting to investigate this mystery was maybe half as interesting to watch as it was fun for me to film. Alright, I just finished getting the product page pictures of those Mindscape designs I rinsed out earlier. Now all that's left to do is finish up the product pages, then drop them on my site. And if you're by chance wondering what the hell all of these imposter Christmas present props are doing consuming almost the entirety of this room, which I call my cloffice, then be sure to hit subscribe and stay tuned, because something I'm calling Mission Deprocrastination is gonna be dropping soon, which is gonna be my attempt at documenting my own personal mission to overcome procrastination, perfectionism, and planning paralysis in an attempt to save my online small business from extinction due to my own self-sabotaging tendencies that have spiraled out of control. And with that, it's now time that I stop procrastinating the completion of the first few Mission Deprocrastination videos.